Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Zareta Ricks, the proud, extremely proud executive director of Opening Act. For 20 years, Opening Act has been intentionally working to level the playing field for students attending New York City public high schools by showing up on high school campuses across the city to provide free, high quality theater programming. We know at Opening Act, and extensive research continues to prove that arts education is essential and a key contributor to building community, self esteem, and creating joy for our youth. Joining me in this conversation are two highly committed and multi talented individuals who are equally as committed to this great work. And so it is an honor to introduce Michael Wiggins, the Director of Engagement and Education at Little Island. Michael, so great to see you and thank you so much for joining us. And in the
Sarita,
latter part of
thank you
this
for having me.
fantastic. In the latter part of this conversation, we are going to be joined by our very own New York City public advocate, Jumaane Williams. But Michael, let's talk. With everything that's happening right now, the crisis that the city is in, the crisis that our young people is in, and now arts education, as the Department of Education is really working on their plans to reopen our schools. Can you talk to us? You've been a long time teaching artist, administrator, and advocate for arts education in New York City. What do you see as the priority that we should be focused on right now?
Well, I was listening to Corey Johnson this morning. He was doing his regular sojourn on the Brian Lair show, and of course they were talking about reopening in the schools. Mm-hmm. And I was struck, as I often am, by the piecemeal nature of our solutions to things. Every school is so individual and has individualized leadership and multiple leadership in one building. New York is a very diverse town, but the school system, has some features that are homogenous. I mean, it's mostly black and brown children in that system. And so what was so interesting to me was the idea that one solution is not going to work for all schools and all students. And that's a difficulty that may be insurmountable, because I'm not sure that we have, as a system, or that the system has, prioritized the innovation or creative space that it could have done if the system were smaller. And so now we're really running behind the bus in a lot of ways and paying the price for things that we didn't attend to when there was no pandemic to deal with. And the pandemic has revealed, it has caused its own share of problems, absolutely. But what it really has done is revealed the things and the inequities that are already there, yep, and the issues that have not been solved. And, somebody's got to pay the piper sooner or later, and now is the time. So the sense of urgency, of course, has risen. And I think the priority is really about innovation, is about thinking, it's about creative problem solving. When the federal government made its move to send people immediate relief during this emergency, I remember laughing, because we have always been told that there's not enough money. There's not enough to go around. But in that moment, we found those resources. And so it does confirm something that we know in our heart. This is a rich country. This is a rich town. We have a lot of money. And we need to be throwing money at innovation at this point, I feel. I have some other priorities in relationship to that, if you'd like to hear them. But that's really my main thesis, that there are a lot of minds that can solve these problems for us, and we need to invite them into the space. The system needs to invite them into the space. The chancellor needs to invite them into the space to start really looking at the issues, and not just one by one, but there are a lot of intersectional things that must be addressed. And so, I don't see that happening. Frankly, I'm not sure that's something that government has been good at or has been encouraged to be good at. especially most recently. But I think that is where it needs to go, and it has to have an understanding of the local issues and respond to them.
Thank you, Michael. I mean, you said so many things that I definitely can yes and I also think that this is a unique opportunity for us, right? Especially for those of us that are in this creative space who may not have been a part of those conversations. And I just have to pause a moment to say welcome to our New York City public advocate, Jumaane Williams. Sir, thank you so very much. It is an absolute honor to share this screen and this time with you. Thank you.
Peace and blessings. Honored to be here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And so Michael and I, we just kicked off the conversation and he was talking about what he sees as a priority that we should be focused on right now. But I have a question for you. And
Sure.
do you mind if I call you Jumaane, public advocate? What makes you most comfortable?
all that works. I've been called much worse than all those things. So I'm good.
All right, so for the sake of this conversation, I will call you Jumaane.
Sure.
And so before the pandemic, only 40% of New York City public high schools had theater programs. Arts organizations like Opening Act, we continue to work extremely hard and have done so over the years to fill the tremendous need for arts in New York City public schools, while also supporting positive youth development. With COVID, the current budget crisis, and scaled back in-person access to the arts, do you think that we are now being forced to move backwards?
Yes, folks want us to move backwards, and we have to be kind of strident to make sure that doesn't happen. We have a tendency to treat arts as an aside to education, like something that's supplemental. When I think most folks, when they think about it, it is really integral to a whole education. When people talk about STEM, I always try to make sure we talk about STEAM so that we keep arts back in there. And it's very clear the schools that are usually considered top schools and things and places that people want to go, they have arts programs and they have sports programs that people not only can take, oftentimes have to take as part of the suite of classes they have to take. And the schools that don't simply don't have any. You have some schools that have all the programs and some schools will have none. Now we have to make sure that we continue to let folks know that this is not an aside. This is not something that we should fund. This is something we have to fund if we want to provide the best education that we can to the students who are in the most underserved neighborhoods.
Thank you. And as an elected official, I know you have a background in the arts. Can you talk about how that impacted you growing up as a young person?
My first love is acting. I have Tourette's syndrome, my ADHD, but when I'm acting on stage, a lot of times my tics go away. It's a very zen place for me. I think it was a few things. One, my mother raised myself and my sister, two knucklehead children, by herself, and I think she wanted to make sure we had our energy was used constructively. So arts was a place that we spent a lot of times in. I went to Harlem School of the Arts. I did theater. I did chorus. I was in the All City High School chorus, and that allowed me actually to travel the world: Austria, Hungary, Spain, Czech Republic. First of all, just traveling the world, just seeing other cultures. Just when we toured to go to different states, seeing the rest of the world is amazing. I had the pleasure of going to Grenada with Dr. Betty Shabazz. My parents are from Grenada, and she told me something that her husband, Malcolm X, used to tell her: would take a picture of the world and see if you can see yourself in it. If not, how do you put yourself there? It's hard to even take a picture of the world if you can't even imagine it. Right. And so the arts can physically take you to places, and it can open your mind creatively, so you can imagine things. And it's been an integral part of who I am. I have been very open also. I've been in therapy for the past 4 years. It's the best thing I've ever done in my life. And one of the things that my therapist recommended was that I don't give up the acting. So I'm proud. I work with an organization called Theater of War, and we do readings connected with violence and other themes. And it's just a big part of who I am, and it's been helpful for me in my life's journey.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Michael. Michael, you're no stranger to the stage. Can you share a little about your love of theater and why you think it can be a powerful tool right now?
Oh yeah, I went to NYU. I went to the graduate acting program at NYU. I graduated in '98, and of course, I was doing all the same kind of things that the public advocate was doing when I was a young person. I think I wouldn't be here sitting where I am, if it weren't for my love of theater and the training that I got as a theater artist. It informs everything that I do in my administrative work. Administration is a creative act, and the processes that you learn in creative spaces are transferable. They're applicable to almost any job you have. I think there's a phenomenon that is, it's anecdotal, but you see it all the time, especially in a world where people temp. If you bring in somebody who was an artist, an actor or any kind of artist in a temp space, very often the managers there will say, "Oh my God, can you stay? We love the way you work," because you can drop us into almost any situation. We're used to the unknown. We're used to not knowing, right? And we can proceed. So that's a very valuable space for job readiness and career readiness, I think.
Can I just add something?
Of course.
Because one, I actually applied to NYU undergrad for theater, and I actually passed that audition, but my grades were terrible. That's a whole nother school, whole nother story. And so they recommended I go to another school and transfer. I went to Brooklyn College for theater, and actually switched my major to film and political science. And so I took another trajectory. But it's good to see New York, NYU is producing great folks, and I was still in good shape. But I did want to mention, some of the transferable skills for me, even with theater, just being able to, I feel like when I'm giving a speech on a debate stage, being able to command that space and the comfort with the audience, all came from being on stage in theater and understanding the energies and being able to move with it and help control it in a way that's been just remarkably beneficial for me as an elected official.
Thank you. Jumaane, I'm going to throw another question your way. And so Black, Indigenous, and young people of color, who make up 80% of the student population in New York City public schools, are now enduring the intersecting traumas of COVID-19 and the racial injustice that we see every day. What do our youth and young adults need right now, in your opinion? And how can arts organizations like Opening Act support and continue to bring hope to our young people?
That's a great question. And I always remind folks, the pandemic has not created any new problems. It's exacerbated and magnified the problems that were already there. And so those statistics were there long before the pandemic. In fact, if people had believed in equity with their actions and money the way that they said they did, the pandemic would not have hit those communities as hard in the first place. And we saw the same discrepancies during the pandemic when people were making decisions. And I always make the mic hot, but it was local decisions made on a city and state level that doomed some of these communities. And obviously it was terrible what happened to the federal government, but we got to ignore him. Locally, we should have gotten better decisions, and we didn't, and it was terrible. And right now, as we mentioned, as we speak, they're about to make another bad decision, I believe, which is opening the schools way too soon. So the same communities that were dealing with these issues beforehand will hit the hardest in the communities, may feel the brunt again as they reopen the largest school system in the nation, just swing the doors open. And it's really bad. And it's just so frustrating to see people say one thing, but doing another. But right now, we really need our young people to have the resources that everybody else is needed. So often we talk about economic inequality. I always try to talk about resource inequality. I'm not sure if people are ever going to make the same amount of money, but that shouldn't stop you from being able to get quality health care or mental health services, or being able to have an arts program or a sports program. You should be able to have access to those resources. And we have to find a way to make those resources equitable. And our students deserve to have access to all of those things. And quite honestly, in other places, sometimes schools are not able to provide them, but the Parent Teachers Association, the PTAs, live in areas where they can raise money that supplement the things that are needed. But what happens in places where that doesn't occur? And that really affects public safety, because communities that have quality education, quality housing, good jobs, good food, they don't need a police officer in every corner. And so we have to really begin to redefine what public safety is and stop sending police to solve the job that so many other agencies are supposed to be solving. So as we're looking at, we are going to a very dire situation when it comes to economics. It's easy to try to say you're progressive when there's money flowing, but you really begin to see what happens when the spigot starts to dry up. And our governor saying he has no problem raising the cost of some of the things that people need, but he has a problem with raising additional revenue from the millionaires and billionaires.
Michael, would you like to add anything?
Well, I feel really close to that answer. Mm-hmm. I mean, I have very, very little to add. I was thinking about the question earlier because you did preview it for me, and innovation is one thing that I'm thinking about. There's another space that I'm really interested in is the idea of choice. I would say, all my public statements have been, in opposition to the idea of a charter school. But again, if we look at that again, smaller schools, charter schools, can respond more innovatively to problems like this, for instance, to immediate situations. And so again, I start to wonder, I look at myself and I wonder, what is this commitment to the public space, is in some ways is cutting off your nose to spite your face. We have a commitment to a civic connection, to the idea of a public school system. We have demonstrated that commitment as a community. Black and brown people are committed to the public space. But the idea of having choice and being able to be agile, et cetera, we will sacrifice that, right, in order to hold true to our values. And there has to be a third way. There has to be a middle ground. I think that I want Black and brown children to have the same kind of innovative space, to live in that kind of problem solving space with the adults around them, as all children who are highly resourced get. I want our school system to be as agile as a small, well-funded charter school. I think we should demand that. What we got instead was small schools. We got a kind of a tasty idea of smallness, but we don't get the resources to go with it. And so you cannot respond innovatively and actively to emergency situations, for instance. But we're really talking about a long-term problem and intractable problems. And the priorities are like innovation, choice, elevating Black leadership is important in this space. Childcare and jobs top the list. None of these problems will be solved. None of these solutions will come to fruition if we don't really, wrangle with the impacts of hypercapitalism and patriarchy and the dominant culture and how it has put us in a position of vulnerability. All these things are connected. And of course, the arts are an essential part of that and may provide some of the answers.
And just to add, you mentioned charter schools, and I saw it up close. I got engaged last year, and that came with the ability to help raise an amazing 11-year-old child, and who was actually at the time going to Success Academy. Now, Success has a whole bunch of issues. Eva Moskowitz is just, that's a whole nother thing to talk about. And so I don't want to act like Success is the poster child here, because they have some very bad practices. But I got to see the difference because we moved, and she started going to a public school right as COVID was beginning. And the ability of Success to adapt what her friends were going through and the system that they put in place remotely and continuing education was so much different than the public schools she started to go in. And that's just not it's not necessary. And we have to have people who, as Mike was mentioned, is going to adapt quickly and be able to make these decisions in a way that helps everybody. And that's just not what happened here. We saw failures. Now, it's a big system, so I don't want to deny how difficult it is. But we are making and have made decisions that just made no sense.
And Public Advocate, want to be respectful of your time. And so I'm just going to ask you one last question. And I just want to say thank you again on behalf of Opening Act, on behalf of the millions of, New York City kids that are, some of them are afraid, right? Some of them are fearful of going back to school. My daughter is 14 years old. She goes to a charter school. And I mean, for her, it's really just about the social engagement. But I just want to say thank you so much for not only being an advocate for our city, but being an advocate for our youth. And want to ask, do you have any parting words of wisdom for arts organizations, for parents, for our students, for our audience, about how we can continue to provide access to quality arts programs and continue to bring these resources to our communities.
I know. I appreciate this time. I'm sorry I couldn't stay longer, but thank you so much. This is a great discussion, and I see I have a kindred spirit in Michael and his answers and your questions. I do want to know why y'all have this beautiful artwork on this stuff, and I don't. That's a whole nother thing. I see open air. I see the star. I got nothing. I got to figure out how to do it. But you know, the two things I always say. One is you know, do what you can with what you have where you are. My uncle would always tell me to do as much good as I can for as many people as I can for just as long as I can, and that you know, just keep moving with what it is that we have. But we do have to continue to push, and I have accepted that, you know, we in our community have to do things 2-3 times faster to get, you know, half of the result that the folks are getting. But that's just the reality of it. And so we have to continue to do that. And we have to connect with other people in other areas of discipline, because very often we're doing it in a silo, and we don't have strength like that. And so we need to connect with the folks who are doing the sports, with the folks who are doing the science, all of those folks, the folks who are working in housing, because we're very often fighting for the crumbs that are left over for all of these things. But if we join together, it would be so much better, because if all of those things were working in these communities, it'd be much different. And so I've been trying to see how we can link all those things together. But we have to not let go of the fact of how important arts is. And the last thing is always for whomever's listening, Black, white, brown. We have a system now that is based on hierarchical privilege. It's just this is what it is. That's the way the country was founded. I don't think we're trying to reform a system. I think we're trying to replace one, which kind of makes it more difficult because the system is there, is actually working how folks intended it to work. But I always say none of us, Black, white, brown, are responsible for that system that we got, but we're all responsible for the system we give to the next generation. So it's just about what part can we play to help push forward another system. And whatever I can do in my capacity as public advocate or not to help you, I want to continue to do that. Thank you so much.
All right.
Blessings.
All right. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, Michael. And so we're going to keep this conversation going. I'm like, I just thought we just opened up a whole can of worms. Because the reality of it is that, we have to do what we can in the moment. And it sounds strange, right, to be in the midst of a pandemic and a crisis and to say take advantage of the moment. But the reality of it is that there's a heightened awareness. And I think that there are more people now who are ready to be bold and courageous, right, to continue to push forward and advance the quality of life for our young people. And so I say, let's do it, and let's do it together. And so what I'm going to do now to our general audience, we have 2 additional panelists that are going to join this conversation, and they both know firsthand how important access to the arts is. So please welcome Tammi Cubliette, who is an actor. Hi, Tammi.
Hi.
Hi, Tammi.
Hi. Teaching artist, and she's a New York City native.
I am.
And then we also have an amazing young lady, Odley Jean, who is joining this conversation. Hi, Odley. She is a former opening act student, and she's also the star of the Netflix series Grand Army. And so, Odley and Tammi, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Having us.
I mean, I hope you had an opportunity to hear what we started with Jumaane and Michael. But again, the whole purpose of this conversation is to bring awareness and to really discuss how important it is for us to continue to provide quality arts education to our young people in the midst of a pandemic.
Yeah.
Right? And something that Public Advocate said really stirred, something in me, that the issues that we're facing right now, they were pre-COVID.
Oh, yeah.
But again, it's an opportunity right now while the light is shining or while the curtain is open. What are we doing with this time right now to make sure that our young people are not forgotten about? What are we doing with this time right now while with the DOE being very uncertain, right? Unfortunately, at this time, they cannot guarantee the quality of education that our young people will receive for the foreseeable future. However, one thing that we are certain about is that arts education must continue to be accessible and available. And so I thank you so much for joining. And so Odley, I am going to start with you. Opening act has been at your former high school, Clara Barton. You know, and I'm from Brooklyn, and my elementary school is actually adjacent to Clara Barton, PS 241. And so shout them out really quickly. But, you know, we've been at Clara Barton since the year 2000. Can you tell us, talk to us, what did it mean, you know, to be a Clara Barton student and to have access to an organization like Opening Act for theater?
Well, I'll give you a little background so we can get like in the feel of it a little, like real quick. So I've always had a passion for acting, and I started doing little plays in church, like, you know, during Easter, Christmas, but I knew that I wanted to kind of like get in the groove of it. But, you know, acting classes were super expensive, and based on my circumstances, I didn't have access to that. So I joined a program called Total Voice in Clara Barton. Remind you, I was super shy, super like in my shell, and that was cut short because the school unfortunately defunded it. But then I came across Opening Act because they were having a showcase at the end of the semester, and I was offered extra credit if I went, and that's how I came across Opening Act. And that's when I realized, because I didn't know there was another program in my school that focused on theater. So I started going the next semester. We met once every week. I'm not gonna lie, home life was hectic, school life was hectic. So I needed a place to kind of challenge myself, but also I needed a safe space, and I felt like Opening Act really offered that. So not only did I meet amazing people and like have amazing, like built amazing relationships even till now, but they offered opportunity. They offered, you know, classes. They offered scholarships, and based, like, you know, where I'm from, you don't really get that often, or you're not exposed to those resources. So it's amazing that Opening Act was really like my foundation and really uplifted me, and I give them credit nonstop because that's where I first started. That's where I had a space to feel safe and do what I love, and, you know, break out of my shell, and also, you know, like think about my future and feel hopeful and feel like I can get somewhere and feel like I can be something. And look where I am.
Look at you, like,
yeah, it's important. I really feel like the art saved me. So around these times, like even just meeting one week, like one day a week, that made me want to go to school. And it made me, like, you know, kind of see things differently outside and at home. So it's super important, especially around these times where we don't have school to go to. So we're home, you know, we're kind of like stuck in our circumstances and situations, even though there's silver linings throughout this moment and this pandemic, but it's tough times, and we need to value like young artists, especially around these times.
Thank you, Odley. Tammi. Now,
Hello.
you've done it all, right? And I don't know where to start, but can you talk to us? How has your life's journey been informed by access to the arts?
Well, you know, I grew up a kid in the 70s, and when theater was like for everybody, you know, it was affordable. It wasn't like, you know, $700 tickets, even though, you know, God bless. But so my single mom was able to take us out to plays. Like she would get tickets from her boss, you know, and we saw, I had to check with my sister just to make sure I wasn't dreaming. I was like, did we see The Wiz on Broadway? And she was like, yeah, we did. You know, we saw The Wiz on Broadway. We saw the King and I. We saw Raisin in the Sun, you know, and these were just like regular shows that we just got to see, you know. And even though my mom wasn't an artist, she valued the arts, you know. I don't even think she just knew that it brought something to her life, and she wanted to share that with us. So we were exposed early on, you know. And at my school, a teacher took us one time to the New York Poets Cafe, and I saw, I realized years later that I saw the great Pedro Pietri live and in person, you know, like the spoken word artist that was, and, you know, so all of those things, you know, I knew that like that had to be a part of my life no matter what I did, you know. And of course, you know, I decided to become an actress, but I knew early on that like arts was going to be a part of my life, you know, and it always has been.
Thank you. I remember being in elementary school, and I went to see Cats. And I mean, my world was blown.
Yeah.
Right. Very similar story. I grew up in Brooklyn, right? And like Tammi just said, arts education, it just was a part of the fabric of our school.
Yeah.
And so there was so many opportunities to be exposed to things outside of the neighborhood. And I remember when I first went to see Cats, I saw it twice actually. And I really felt like I was in a different world.
Mm-hmm.
And it helped to just shape my appreciation for theater, because I had never experienced anything like that. So I'm a 10-year-old, right? I mean, my biggest excitement at that time was Michael Jackson.
Yeah, exactly.
But what it did, it helped to broaden my perspective and really introduce me to what the creativity and the innovation and just the passion, and it helped me to reimagine just in my own personal little 10-year-old mind what arts was. And so I started to write, and, you know, in my head, I'm a poet. And so I'm more of a writer, and was never one for the stage, oddly, you know. I applaud you. I could not get over the stage fright. But I definitely do know that had I not had that experience at a young age, where my mom wasn't asked to purchase a ticket, right? And I grew up in a single parent home with, you know, siblings. And so I was not, the opportunities that were presented had absolutely nothing to do with my socioeconomic status.
Exactly.
And that is what we need to continue to provide for our young people. Exactly. You know, and so, and Michael, I'm just going to ask you, and I'm looking forward to hearing this answer. When you think about where we are now, you think about the current climate, you think about the experiences that our youth have faced, the experiences that they will continue to face, that's out of their control. What do you think the biggest struggle will be for us to continue to provide a platform for our young people to showcase their brilliance?
Oh, I think they're going to have no problem showcasing their brilliance. They do it on TikTok every day. They do it on social media every day. So I've always laughed. I mean, as soon as I was made hip to it by colleagues, people I work with, you know, years ago, understanding that, you know, we're coming in trying to teach, saying we're going to teach you artistic understandings. We're going to try to get you really excited about art. Young people love art. Fashion is an adornment. All those things are, I consider them to be art. That is absolutely the space that we need to be paying more attention to. You know, that lesson has to be learned. I guess every generation has to learn it. You know, everybody would tell you they love Elvis. They hated Elvis when he came. Everything young people do gets criticized. But if we, and of course, a lot of stuff out there in the public space is problematic. But young people have an inherent, it's a natural human need. They're human. They have a need for self-expression, and they find it. They find it in ways that are happening right now on platforms online that we have no idea about, that we don't even know how they intersect together. We don't even know what half the words or ideas mean, the references, etc. They're highly literate. And so we just need to start with an asset-based mentality. We have to shift our thinking totally and radically to embrace things that we talk about all the time, to actually embrace love, to actually create spaces in which young people can heal, to actually heal ourselves, allow ourselves to heal, to confront the idea of what would happen, especially people in my generation. I've been having this conversation a lot. What would happen if my generation actually healed? I think the impact of that would be noticed, would be real, transformational in terms of the spaces we create for young people. There's so many, you know, you have a lot of the answers. All the answers have been spoken out. We need to stick together. We need to love each other. We need, and that love is going to look different depending upon the context. But that's always the answer. And I would say that art is always the answer, no matter the question. And that's not even a joke. It sounds jokey. I didn't make it up. Cassie Thornton, I think, made that up, friend of mine. Art is the answer, no matter the question. And if we apply what we know about art to any intractable problem in our society, if we follow that through line, we will find the answer, because artists are inherently problem solvers.
Right. That's right. And I'm going to jump to Odley and Tammi, something that Michael just said. What question has art answered for you both?
Oh.
Well, for me, I have to say, you said what answer?
What answer?
Question.
So he said art is the answer, right? So what was a question in your life that art has answered, that you can look back and reflect now and say, access to the art, so my experience has been.
The first thing I noticed was putting myself in different shoes. So like, just, I guess, like learning how to peel situations and peel the way certain situations, like, make us act or react. And I felt like that dissected that for me, and that allowed me to, and this is in any person's situation too, to kind of get in that person's shoes and understand why they're reacting a certain way. And I learned that through the arts. And also spreading awareness and telling stories. There's nothing so healing about hearing stories and, like, just sparking conversations after that and spreading awareness, and yet alone passing laws through the arts, that can answer so many questions, so many personal questions for people too. Just in any situation, I feel just performing a monologue is like, can be so powerful. That alone could, and even if it's in a topic that we don't understand, just hearing a monologue on that topic could just, open so many different doors and, like, allow you to understand certain situations. And that, I felt like that's how it showed me answers. I hope that's a good enough answer.
Yes.
Oh, my turn? I can't hear you. That's
Sorry.
okay. Wow. I think the question that it answered for me was like, can I feel that? Do I have the ability to feel that? Whatever that is, and it's always surprising, like, I have sat in shows, not necessarily even as a performer myself, but I have seen shows where I went in totally like not expecting anything, and next thing you know, I'm in a puddle of tears, and I'm like, how did that? I had no awareness of how, I had no way to predict I was going to react that way, and it answers questions that that you come up with later afterwards. You're like, suddenly like, wait a minute, I wonder if, and you know what, I never. So for me, it's constantly answering questions for me, whether I'm performing or whether I'm the observer. It's always, it's always answering a question, and it's always rescuing me. Like, the arts really rescued me in so many ways. It gave me a path. It brought people into my life that I needed to have in my life, and it's enriched my life in so many ways. And it's, having it in my life has given me certain preferences of things that I like certain types of art, and I think that that's a beautiful statement. No matter the question, art is the answer, because think about what you turn to when you're feeling a certain way, for the most part, whether, you watch your favorite show, or you listen to your favorite artist, or maybe, you look at some pictures that make you feel a certain way, it's always there for you. So, yeah.
as you all were speaking, I was thinking about like the question that art is answering for me right now, because I've been struggling with, how are we going to make sure that our young people, right, whether they go to school remotely, whether they go to school virtually, how are we going to make sure that they don't lose the passion for those that are aspiring artists, and then those who don't even know anything about the arts, how can we introduce them and help them to reimagine, right? Because that's what the arts does for me.
Yeah.
It helps me to reimagine. And so, and we tell our kids, you can be whatever you want to be, right? But we have to give them intentional experiences that will cultivate and develop imagination. And so that's the question that it answers for me, right?
Mhm.
Like, it's through the arts. That's how you're going to help them. That's how you're going to expose them to opportunities. That's how you're going to open up their window of imagination, so that they can know that beyond the classroom, beyond the building, this world is so full of culture.
Yeah.
It's full of these rich experiences, and it has absolutely nothing to do with, your level of education. It has absolutely nothing to do with your socioeconomic status. It has everything to do with your ability to embrace and value arts and culture, because it will lead you across the world. It will take you across the world.
Yeah.
And so it's one of the things that I'm really most excited about in being in this virtual space, that through conversations like this, that we are now extending our reach. And, people are becoming more well informed about why access to arts education for young people is so critical. And it's just fun. I'm
Yeah.
like, oh my goodness, can we just have fun?
Yeah.
And so, I want to say thank you so much. I know we have an audience out there. If you have any questions, any comments, please feel free, throw them in the chat and I'll get to them. But I want to close this session with a yes and, right? And so we all know about yes and. I was actually introduced to yes and when I started at opening act, and I was like, this is amazing. Where have I been? And I think, again, right, because I think about our young people. They're told no so often.
Yeah.
Like, everything is so contrary to you're amazing, you're wonderful. They're often told no. There's so many limitations. And so this whole concept of yes and, to me, I'm like, this needs to be a policy. That wherever you are, yes and is the model that you live by.
Yeah.
And so, with the heightened awareness around the world, the structural inequities that we're facing, and again, it's being amplified during the pandemic, we have an elevated sense of responsibility. And that is the thing that I say to myself every day. We have a responsibility to our young people to support their social and emotional well being. And so, how can we make space together? How can we bring joy? And what can we do to give our young people the platforms to create and express their identities and tell their stories? And Michael touched on some of those things with TikTok and all of the other virtual platforms that our young people are using. And so my question to you, the yes and question, is what else do you think we can do?
I would say, I guess reaching out to the many things that the youth is exposed to, like Michael said, like TikTok, social media, and all that stuff. Kind of like, I guess, making posts about topics and ways to, kind of spread awareness on that. I feel like also like uh, reaching out to people who don't have access to technology, like the kids who don't have access to technology, being able to transition and think about transitioning into that, because right now everything is, on video and all that stuff. Like, just being able to give the people who don't have the resources that, so they have access to, who knows, like meeting once a week, or like hanging out with friends outdoors. I mean, the summer is ending soon, but like, just doing that and being able to expose them to just simple conversations, checking up on each other. There's just so many things.
Yes.
Yeah. But I would say the most important is just a transition method, like just a transition method that'll reach out to kids who don't even have access to technology at all.
Yeah. Yeah, that was probably the toughest part about teaching past couple months, was that there were some students, some young people that just didn't have a laptop, or they only had their parents' phone, or they had a laptop but the Wi-Fi was not great. And so that, I think I agree, Avi, that that's a big piece, and I think too, to encourage other forms of art, like, because we're opening act and we do improv and we do theater, of course the focus is going to be, it's going to be more theater focused. But I think sometimes, not that we lose young people, but theater may not be their thing. Maybe they want to be around theater people, but it's not really their thing. Maybe they're more like you, Zareta, they're more writers, or they like to draw, or they're more into music, they like to play an instrument. I think bringing more of that into our curriculum in some way, and I don't know how, because I don't know how to play an instrument, so I'm not volunteering for that gig, but just something where there's more of that, because I find that a lot, sometimes they're just not into doing theater, it's just not their bag, so something like that, where it's bringing more different art forms in.
It's an amazingly difficult question to approach, because we are, of course, dealing with the pandemic, and we are all in some way, we're dealing with more forms of isolation. And so I co-sign with everything that's been said before, especially this idea of recognition that we need to get tech into the hands of young people. But I think generally we need to embrace technology and innovative thinking. We need to, I think, as arts educators, embrace technology, because it is a fact of life. It is how people communicate. It's a useful tool right now for creating spaces. And we need to think of that virtual world as real, because it is real. It feels real. When somebody hits a like, you get endorphins. It's a real world. The virtual world and the real world are the same. And I think there's a whole conversation around removing binary, conversations from our thinking, because they limit us. Everything is not an either or proposition. So many of our problems stay because, we have to choose between this or that. Well, that's not the way. There's always a middle path. And in that middle path, we need to be really disciplined with ourselves in our commitment to the things, to the one word and the concept that we all as artists talk about, which is love. And what does love look like when it's activated? And so the idea of embracing community, actually not self-isolating, but embracing community on an organizational level, that means all arts ed organizations should join the advocacy organization that represents them. We should join the roundtable, at least participate in what the Arts and Education Roundtable is doing. And individuals need to also embrace the idea of community, and we need to demand from ourselves the things that we're demanding from the world. If we think that the solutions should be for all, that everyone should benefit, and that that resources should be accessible to all, then we need to represent that when we have positions of power, and we need to take some risks. And as people are doing increasingly now, we need to call stuff out with solutions. We need to call out the isms when we see them in ourselves first. I think there is something that is true about the universe, which is, if you are not dealing with the stuff inside of you, right, then the solution that you have, it's not going to be long term. It's not going to last, or it will fall apart while it's rolling. So I think there's a self-discipline around love that we have to do, and there's specific things that we have to fight for, which are like equity. And so I'm committed now to speaking out. I think every individual has to do that in the way that is safe for them. But we also have to look to each other and ask, are you safe? Is it okay? What can I do to support you? And not succumb to fear.
Michael, Odley, Tammi, thank you. Thank you. This was an amazing conversation. And as the executive director of Opening Act, I'm leaving more inspired. I was started taking notes, because I just see the opportunity, and there's so much wisdom, and there's so many things that you said that I think are tangible and are practical solutions to some of the challenges that we're facing. And so I just want to say thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your time. Thank you for sharing this space. Thank you for everything that you do for our young people. May you stay well. May you stay well, and let's continue to keep the arts alive.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Amen.
Thank you so much.
Nice.
And to my audience, the OA audience, thank you all for hanging out with us this afternoon. I just want to read one of the comments that came through that said, from Marissa, that says, I love the concepts of healing generations and what I think I heard about the role of the arts in passing laws that are thoughtful and equitable. And Marissa, I agree with you 100%. And it's something that we at Opening Act, that we are being diligent about, right? That we no longer we don't only want access to the table, we want to be a part of the decisions that are made. We want to be influencers, and we want to be thought partners. And so thank you all so much for joining. There's another comment that came through that said, join the roundtable. That's from our Deputy Director, Erica Atkins. And so as we look ahead, we'll be making a very exciting announcement on September 3rd. So I encourage you and I invite you all to join us. It is our inaugural State of the Ensemble. And so you will hear from Opening Act and some of our key supporters about how we will continue to advance arts education and social and emotional learning for our young people for this upcoming school year. Thank you again. If you want to stay in the loop with everything that we're doing, our website is up. That's our social media handle. Please continue to stay engaged. Continue to use your voice. Continue to elevate the voices of our young people. If there are any other arts organizations that are joining this afternoon, let's connect. Let's keep arts alive. Thank you all. Be well, and I'll see you on September 3rd at Opening Acts State of the